Solving two-step and multi-step inequalities. Now again, this is going to be a lot like 3-1, using the inequalities to solve the problems. Okay, you're going to get a range of an answer, not just an exact answer. And then we're going to graph. So let's go ahead and get started. We have 45 plus 2b is greater than 61. All right, so our goal is to get the variable by itself. Right now it's attached to this positive 45, so the inverse of 45 is negative 45. So I'm going to subtract 45 from both sides. The 45's cancel, leaving me with 2b greater than 16. All right, again, to get that variable by itself, right now it's being multiplied by this 2. So I'm going to do the inverse and divide by 2. What you do to one side, you do to the other. The 2's cancel here, and I wind up with b is greater than 8. All right, now how do we graph this? Well, first we draw a number line. Okay, and if you remember from the previous lesson, this inequality is just a greater than, so it does not get a closed circle. And this reads that b is some number larger than 8. So I'm going to put 8 down here and maybe 15 up here, just to show that we are going up. Open circle, and the line's going to go in this direction. And that's it. That's how we graph that. Let's do another. I have 8 minus 3y greater than or equal to 29. Again, our goal is to get the y by itself. Right now it's attached to this positive 8. So what's the inverse of positive 8? Negative 8. And what you do to one side, you do to the other. These 8's cancel, bringing down a negative 3y greater than or equal to 21. All right, to get that variable by itself, I'm going to divide because right now they're being multiplied. I'm going to divide by a negative 3. Now if you notice, here's a rule. Whenever you divide by a negative integer, your inequality sign is going to flip around. So, watch this. I'm going to flip this sign around because I divided by a negative. 3 goes into 21 7 times. A positive and a negative give me a negative. So now my answer is y is less than or equal to negative 7. To graph that, that means that y has to be smaller than negative 7 or equal to negative 7. So we're going to have a closed circle on 7. And to show we're going smaller, remember in negatives, you're going farther away from 0, I'm just going to put negative 10 down here. And draw my line going in that direction. So if you remember, whenever dividing by negative, you flip the sign around, you'll be okay. That's the only time we ever flip that inequality around. We have negative 12 greater than or equal to 3x plus 6. Right now I want to get the variable by itself. It's attached to this positive 6, so I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. My 6's cancel, and I get 3x. Bring down my inequality. Negative 12 minus 6 gives me negative 18. Okay, now I'm going to divide by 3. Now notice I am not dividing by a negative 3. We don't care if this one's negative. We only care if this integer is negative in order to flip the sign around. So these cancel, and I get negative 6 here, x. But if you remember from 3-1, we always want the variable first. So I'm just going to flip this whole thing around. I did not change the value of this answer though. Negative 6 is greater than or equal to x. That means that x is less than or equal to negative 6. Notice that it's pointing to the x just like it's pointing to the x here. I never changed the value. Draw a number line. We have negative 6, and I'm going smaller, so I'm just going to put negative 10 down here. This is a closed circle because it is an equal to, and my line's going to go down here. All right. Let's try this one. We have x plus 5 over negative 2 greater than 3. All right, now I'm going to multiply by this negative 2, which in some sense, because it is a denominator, I was originally dividing, so that still does flip my inequality around. These 2's cancel. Now notice when I did that, I did not affect the top numerator at all. So the x plus 5 falls down, but because we were originally dividing by a negative, my inequality is going to flip around. Okay, so notice my inequality flips around, and I get 3 minus 2 gives me negative 6. Now to get the x by itself, I'm going to get rid of this positive 5 by doing the inverse. So I'm going to subtract by 5. The 5's cancel, x falls down, so does my inequality, and negative 6 minus 5 is negative 11. So this reads that x is some number smaller than negative 11. And remember, because it's negative, smaller means we're going farther away from 0. So like maybe toward negative 20. It is an open circle because it's not an equal to, and my line's going to go in this direction. All right, let's try another. 1 minus 2n over 3 greater than or equal to 7. All right, now I'm going to multiply by this 3, but if you notice, I'm originally dividing by that 3, and it's positive, which means I do not need to flip the inequality sign around. So my 3's cancel here, not touching the numerator. It just falls straight down. And because, again, this was a positive, my inequality is going to stay. And 7 times 3 is 21. Now to get that n by itself, I'm going to have to do the inverse of this positive 1. Now notice I'm looking at the sign in front, not the one behind it, the one in front. This is a positive 1, so the inverse is negative 1. So I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. The n's cancel, dropping down a negative 2n. Bring the inequality sign straight down. All right. 21 minus 1 is going to give me 20. All right, now we need to get that variable by itself. Right now it's being multiplied by negative 2, which means I'm going to divide by negative 2. Now if you remember our rule on dividing by negatives, we have to flip that sign around, which means n, and now instead of the sign going this way, the inequality, I'm going to flip it around this way. 2 goes into 20 10 times. A positive and a negative give me a negative. So this reads that n is some number smaller or equal to negative 10. So I'm going to put negative 10 down here. Now I'll just use negative 20. Now this is a closed circle because it is equal to, and my line's going in that direction. All right, let's try one a little bit more complicated. What if we have 2 minus negative 10 greater than 4t? All right, well remember, whenever you have a negative and a negative side by side, negative and a negative become a positive. So this is actually 2 plus 10 greater than negative 4t. All right, I'm going to combine like terms here because they're both constants. It's going to be 2 plus 10, which is 12. Bring down my inequality, minus 4t. All right, we're going to go ahead and divide by negative 4 here to get that t by itself. Now I'm dividing by negative, which means I flip my sign around. 4 goes into 12 3 times. A positive and a negative give me a negative. Now, again, I like to have the variable first, so I'm just going to flip this whole thing around, not changing its value. If you notice, I did not change the value, just made it easier to read. So 3 is some number larger than negative 3. So here's negative 3. Let's just put 0, and maybe we'll put positive 3 down here. Open circle, and the line's going in this direction. All right, last one. We have negative 4 times 2 minus x less than or equal to 8. Do our double rainbow of distributive property. 4 times 2 is going to give us negative 8. 4 times x is going to give us 4x. A negative and a negative is going to give us a positive. Bring down our inequality sign and our 8. To get that variable by itself, I need to get rid of the 8. Right now it's a negative 8, so the inverse is positive 8. So I'm going to add 8 to each side. These 8's cancel, dropping down my 4x. And 8 plus 8 is 16. To get that variable by itself, I'm going to divide by 4. I'm dividing by a positive, so I do not need to flip the inequality. It stays, and x is less than or equal to 4. So that means that x is some number smaller than 4. So I'll put 4 down here, and I'll put 0 here. We're going to have a closed circle because it is an equal to, and the line going in this direction. All right, hope that helps.